It is really, really wonderful to be with all of you here today and to talk a little bit about my experiences as a producer, a director, and also a singer who spent a lot of time looking at specific vocal function and the way that situations can affect the way that our body behaves. So I'd like to start a little bit with a story from 2010. I was in my final year of my Masters of Music, majoring in opera. It was an integrated master's degree, so the other component of it was a study into specific vocal function. And at this point, performing was my absolute world. I'd been on the stage since I was very young, and it was a familiar place. It was kind of comfortable, I guess. Not quite comfortable. There was always a bit of anxiety, but I knew what to expect. So when the university asked me to be a part of a promotional video to be filmed performing and also in an interview, I thought, oh, fantastic. This is going to be great. And I was really excited. I even prepared a brand new aria to sing, and I walked onto set thinking it would be just like any other performance, but it wasn't. The moment the camera went on, my body behaved differently. It wasn't like, it was a little bit like I didn't know my body in that moment. And then it happened. I bombed. Don't you hate that? And worse still, it was on camera, in video. So, you know, is it going to live forever on the internet? When I finally saw the cut, I turned to my partner at the time, who was also an opera singer, and I said to him, quite, I'm not going to say desperately, but I was really seeking something. I said, how bad is it? And he turned to me and he said, well, I love you very much and you're very special. I thought, oh goodness, it's that bad. Okay. So here's the thing. In that moment, when things weren't working and my body was behaving in a way that I wasn't familiar with, what I really needed was a director. I needed someone who was able to talk me through what was happening and what my body was going through at that moment. My body was going into survival response, and I was not prepared. Fortunately, they did give me a slightly, what I would describe now as a generous edit on that video in the months that followed, but it wasn't before I'd asked them if we could all just please forget about that video. But this experience on camera, this first time introduction, was really formative in it. And it's the basis of how I approach a lot of my work as a field producer and director of documentaries. Now, for today, I'm going to be speaking more about my work working in the commercial space as a producer, because in this type of work, I get to meet a lot of different people and many people that don't have experience being on camera. So, with this work, what it means is that I'm on set most days, helping people from chief executives to first timers share their stories on camera. And what we're seeing a lot of at the moment is that we're all under an enormous amount of pressure. It's really tough out there. And there is a little bit of a trend that I'm noticing for some leaders to, in some instances, really double down and apply pressure when they get a bit scared. Their first instinct sometimes to control things. And the way that I view it in my experience is that this doubling down can sometimes be a little bit like grasping, clenching a handful of sand. The tighter you squeeze, sometimes the faster the sand can slip through your hands. So, what this talk is about today is some alternatives. It's about how we can set the stage so our people feel supported, not squeezed, so they can feel their authentic voice and do their best work. So, I want to talk a little bit about voice for a minute. Did you all know that all of your voices are as unique as a fingerprint? No two voices are the same. and that each voice holds a massive capacity for different sounds, colors, and qualities. A big part of our collective lack of exploration of voice can be put down to how we're socialized. From a very young age, many of us are socialized to be quiet. We're warned about being too loud. And some of us were even told by teachers that we're tone deaf or that we can't sing. And this is nonsense. It's not true. And some of these messages not only impact our relationship with our voices and the way that we communicate, but also health outcomes. And the science is fascinating. For instance, what's often labeled as tone deaf in some instances is actually or can actually be the brain prioritizing different notes within the harmonic structure of that fundamental frequency. So sometimes when we might think that someone is what they've incorrectly been told tone deaf, it's actually more of a reimagining. Think of it as like, I mean, I'm not a mathematician, but if the answer is three, they start listing prime numbers. So it's actually something really special and something that we need to be investigating more. So for a long time, we didn't really have much science to work with because vocal research has really only come into the swing of things in the late 70s and the 80s. And before that, and still to this day, we do work with a lot of metaphor. So we can talk about where you place the sound, or perhaps imagining that you're balancing a pearl on a fountain. And this can be really helpful in some instances, but it also can create a bit of mystique around the voice. And I fear that if we understand and there is a little bit of a fear that if we understand the mechanics of voice, that we might ruin the magic. And I don't buy into that so much. So to better understand my voice, I spent years studying specific vocal function and how the body's autonomic responses can effortlessly take control when we're not paying attention. And what I learned is that understanding this is a little like turning the lights on. It's moving us past mysticism and shows us a clear biological reason our body is behaving under pressure the way that it does. So if there's one thing that I've learned over a bit over 1,000 shoots, it's this. When survival brain is in charge, our behaviors can be very similar. A billionaire, your neighbor, it really doesn't matter. People are people are people. But one of the most instructive lessons that I learned didn't come from being on set. It came from being the person in the chair whose brain was under enormous stress. It came from my own story. Back in 2012, I had surgery to remove a brain tumor. The surgery was a success, but it took a really long time. And afterwards, the doctors prepared my family for one of the likely side effects, which would be aphasia. They said his concentration will likely be impaired for some time. So you might need to only have one person speaking to him at a time. And what I eventually realized is that this advice that was given to my family for post-surgery care is very similar to now how I give advice to film crews for especially for people that may be experiencing nerves for their first time on camera. Because that feeling of being overwhelmed with too many voices, of not being able to focus, is an experience we share when our brain is under intense pressure. Whether that pressure is from surgery, from a camera, or a deadline, the survival brain reacts in a similar way. So this trick isn't really a trick, really. It's about empathy. It's remembering that when the person is in the hot seat, what you need to be giving them is your curiosity and a simple, single, calm voice to follow. Recently, I was on a shoot in a beautiful large warehouse, and the subject of the documentary was a senior leader in the organization. They were also the key client for the project, and it was their first time on camera. To raise the stakes, A whole group of senior leaders were eagerly moving in and out of the room to watch. And as a filmmaker, I was really excited by this cinematic wide shot that we'd set up. But as I walked to the client to walk them over to the interview chair, with all those eyes on them, I could hear in their voice a bit of a change as we were speaking with each other. I could feel this nervousness, but then I saw it. I moved back to the monitor and I noticed this a shuffling in the chair, fidgeting with hands, but it wasn't that getting comfortable shuffling in a chair. This was this was a different kind of shuffle, and it was a cue that I couldn't ignore. So I needed a reason to go over and have a private conversation with them. Just not make a big deal out of it, but just touch base. So I took a photograph of the frame as a reason and motivation to go over there. I walked the 7 meters over to the subject and I bent down my knee so we could have eye level contact. And I showed them the shot. I said, "How are you feeling? Is there anything that you need?" And they looked at me and they opened up and they said, "My body's changed a lot in the last 6 months, and I really don't know whether I'm feeling that great about it." And in that moment, I realized what I needed to do as a director. It's creating an environment where people feel comfortable to express themselves freely. So together, we quietly changed the plan. I was able to organize the moving of the camera to a tighter shot. We changed the lens. I was able to show the interview subject what our new frame was, all while no one else knew. I was a little sneaky because we don't want to share things like that with anyone. And and the subject had the most wonderful time. They were able to present in an articulate way and think elastically. And at the end of the situation, at the end of the shoot, they in fact managed to enjoy themselves. And here's the thing, their thinking brain didn't come back online with a command. It came online the moment they perceived that the perceived threat was removed. When an environment shifts from being one of high pressure to one of safety, our brains are able to move from a state of surviving back to a state where we're able to think. Have you ever been in a really tough conversation and suddenly realized that you're gripping your hands really tightly? Or maybe you've seen a colleague delivering a message and they might have white knuckles. There's a lot of tension, a lot of tightness. As it turns out, our brain, the part of the brain that controls our hands, is a direct neighbor to the part that controls our voice. So while not directly interconnected, their proximity means they are susceptible to one another's influence. So if you're watching someone, maybe they're performing, maybe they're in a high pressure situation, and their hands are looking stiff or rigid, it's possible something may be also happening with their voice. This neurological link has a clear real world impact. Research. Oh, thank you, Anna. Oh, that's so lovely. So the neurological link is clear. Research consistently shows the strong correlation between the number of hand gestures speakers use and how charismatic and credible an audience perceives them to be. So on set, locked hands are a cue for me. It's a signpost that says, this person may not be feeling as safe as they could. It may be getting in the way of their expression. My response is to change the environment, to soften my tone, to maybe simplify the task, to pause. Because when you create enough safety for someone to free their hands, you're often creating enough safety for them to find their authentic voice. We've all felt it before. You're in a tough conversation, you're feeling vulnerable, and you get that choking sensation. Your voice gets tight, and maybe it might even crack a little bit. This is your body doing exactly what it was designed to do. to protect your larynx. Here's the kicker. The primary biological purpose of your vocal folds and the full structure of your larynx, and by the way, actually, your true vocal folds, which are the little bands that vibrate right in here, are roughly the size of your little fingernail. They are so, so tiny. It's just a wonderful little fact. I just thought I'd just throw that in. Um, but the point is that this laryngeal structure, what happens when we become stressed is one of the functions is the larynx will actually shoot right up. The tongue will actually then also press down on it. So we get this kind of like dual squishing, and none of this is optimal for comfortable vocalizing. But this is part of this autonomic response, you see, to keep us safe when we're feeling there is a perceived threat. So it's a little bit tricky. And now I've actually got a little bit of an exercise for everyone to do at home. So I haven't done this online before, so I'll see if I can illustrate it clearly. So I want you to take your hands and I want you to place them under your seat, if you're able to place them under your seat. So if I stand up with my chair, you can see I'm holding my chair like that. And I want you to have a really nice firm grip, okay? And I'm going to count down from 3. And when I get to 1, I want you to feel like you're preparing to lift your chair off the ground. So you're going to exert a little bit of pressure there, right? Okay. So the key is you're going to prepare to lift yourself off the ground. In 3, 2, 1. Why did everyone stop breathing? This is called thoracic fixation. This is another one of those tricky little things the body will do, but it just makes the point that there's a lot going on that we don't even think about, but it does have practical applications with the way that we use our voice because the primary purpose of the vocal folds is actually to keep us alive. It's not to vocalize at all. It's to keep the airway free and to remove any blockages. We can do that with coughing, and to also trap air for physical effort. For instance, when you go launch yourself for a sprint. So what's important to know is your body will prioritize its role for survival over speech. And when we feel unsafe, the larynx rises, the throat tightens, and our authentic resonant voice can become a little compromised sometimes. It's your body trying to protect you in a way that no longer serves you. Now, while we can't control someone's survival response, we can influence the environment that can trigger it. And that's where we move from the science into the practice. So about a month ago, I was on a shoot with a chief executive, and for the sake of this talk, we'll call them Sam. And Sam was also joined by their very well-meaning team of anxious executives. Now, you might ask, how anxious were these executives? 2 of them spent the night before actually being physically ill. This is actually something that is really, unfortunately, quite common. It is something that sometimes people experience before they go to set, even if they're not the ones doing anything. The objective for this shoot was simple. Sam needed to answer a small handful of questions, which I would walk them through, while I kept an eye on their answers with relation to the edit, their disposition, and their body language. We weren't live. This was a pre-record, and due to Sam's schedule, the time we had to capture the interview was a little less than I'd recommend, but I knew between the crew, Sam, and myself, we were going to make it work. Before Sam arrived, I broke down the structure of the setup and the interview with the executive team. I listened to their fears and concerns and explained that at the end of the interview, I'd refer to them to offer any follow-ups or any corrections that they might like to make or add. Sam arrived and was feeling quite rushed. I walked them over to the interview chair. I popped down on one knee. No one wants you looming over you when you're feeling when you've got a lot on your mind. And I gave a clear top line rundown of what we were going to do and what Sam needed to do. We started filming, but after the very first take, the executives started jumping in with ideas, with thoughts, and conversations. And then it happened. This incredibly capable chief executive began to look vaguely in my direction, overwhelmed by the noise, and said the 5 words that tell me a person's brain has been hijacked. Sam said, um, I'm sorry, I don't understand. In that moment, my job wasn't to debate the ideas of the executives. My job was to protect the person in the chair. With only minutes to spare because of Sam's schedule, I turned to the team and thanked them for their insight and politely asked if it would be possible for us to clear the room. Because we'd done the groundwork of building this trust, they graciously left. And as the door closed, Sam looked at me, smiled, and just said, "Thank you." In the quiet that followed, Sam was able to reconnect with their authentic voice, and we got a really fantastic result. This is the power of being a filter. You're not just managing noise, you're creating the conditions for a person's best and most authentic self to show up. So it wasn't obviously just Sam experiencing some cognitive disorganization, it was also the well-meaning team. So managing external environment is an important step, but creating a safe space is only one part of the work. Our next tool focuses on what's inside that quiet space and how we can help someone connect with and express their own authentic voice. Okay, it's really fun. So most of us operate with just a few default, what I like to call default vocal settings. Even though our voices are capable of so much more. Most of us have our speaking voice, we'll probably have a singing voice, we might have a voice for the phone, and maybe we might have another voice that we use for babies or cute animals. But we're really given permission to explore the full range of all the sounds our instrument can actually make. So here's the critical question for us. If society is telling us, has been telling us from a young age to be quiet, to stop playing with our voices, we have this incredible instrument that most of us learn to live inside quite a small space with of default sounds. But what if those habitual vocal qualities are accidentally undermining our messages? What if the voice quality that we're using isn't telling the same story as our true intention? To better understand one small part of the vocal colors at our disposal, let's consider one beautiful part of the larynx. When we're talking about authentic connection, the significance of when we tilt the larynx cannot be underestimated. The scientific name for what we do when we literally tilt the larynx is the tilting of the thyroid cartilage. And you can think of it as a shield-shaped structure that houses and protects your vocal folds. You can sometimes easily see this in people with larger larynxes. And so it's also known as the Adam's apple. And kind of, if you touch it right there, that's the edge of the thyroid cartilage there. And this quite literally tilts down. And what this does So it actually stretches and thins your vocal folds. So for any of you out there that play musical instruments, you'll know that if like a guitar, a violin, when we stretch the string, we can go higher. So this tilting, one of the applications that it does allow us to go higher, but that this bit's really interesting. So you know how when you talk to a baby or a cute animal and your voice instinctively gets a little sing-songy, it might even go a little bit high. Oh, what a beautiful baby. Oh, that's so sweet. Well, that was my little tilt demonstration for you today. Probably the only demonstration of the day. But there was some fantastic research that came out of Singapore that made an incredible discovery about the importance of this tilting of the thyroid cartilage when it comes to speaking to children. So, what the researchers described, or what they referred to this as mothering voice or motherese, and they determined that this use wasn't, in fact, for us for some kind of pleasure of playing with the voice, although it can be fun, it's actually to the benefit of the child. Babies benefit from being spoken to with tilt. That high-pitched musical quality, in fact, helps their brains figure out where one word ends and the next word begins. So this is a really crucial tool for learning. It's not only the sound of safety, but teaching and connection all wrapped up in one. So through tilting, we have access to this sweet, beautiful sound that allows us to show empathy to one another and forge connection. But it's also true that some listeners, when they hear tilt, it can leave them feeling as if they're being spoken down to, or can perceive that tone as being condescending. And here's the messy truth of that. Many of us are flying a little blind with our voices. You know, again, we're socialized from a young age to be quiet. We're not encouraged and given permission to play. And on top of that, we're actually physically not very good at hearing our own voices. You will all know when you've heard a recording of your voice, it sounds quite different. So we're not really in a particularly strong position to be figuring out and interrogating what's going on with our voices unless we have a little bit of help. So I guess my critical question is, if we're stuck in unexamined habits and we can't really hear ourselves all that accurately, how do we know if the story we think we're telling is the story that the audience is hearing? Okay. So we've established that sweet sound of the tilted larynx is one specific sound that we can create. But where's our home base? Where's a nice, comfortable place? We might refer to this, scientists might refer to this as modal voice or speech quality. And to do this, you could simply imagine reading a shopping list out loud to yourself. It's that easy, grounded, no nonsense sound. So you could also think of the voice of a news broadcaster. So to discover this yourself, an easy way to get into this posture is by simply saying, uh-oh, uh-oh. There you go. You're in that posture. And the fascinating part about that is that there is an acoustic richness which makes the sound not only clear and grounded, but it is the most intelligible and easiest for the human ear to process. So often when we're under pressure, we might abandon this incredibly effective, authentic home base or modal voice for a less efficient vocal posture. Think of that reflexive move where the larynx shoots up in times of stress. So as leaders, reconnecting with our own modal voice is foundational. It's the voice that not only is most sustainable to us, but also it's one an audience will most often perceive as confident and trustworthy. Reading from auto cue can sometimes be a little bit of a surprise for first timers. We typically approach it with the understanding, well, I can read words, I can read out loud, this will be a breeze. But this isn't factoring in the environment. You've got lights, cameras, a script to follow that's actively moving, and maybe even colleagues watching you. It's in a situation, it's a situation with the potential to send your brain spiraling into some deep, unhelpful personal questions. And you don't want to be doing that on camera. And if I ever get a sense that a first timer might be being a little bit overstimulated by their team before a first read, I let them know two things. Reading auto cue is a little bit like riding a bike. You can expect to fall off a few times when you first start, and that's perfectly normal. Also, while people may need to work harder initially, it's a task that with a little bit of practice, you can excel at really quickly. So when we start, the first attempt is always a full script read. If you trip over a word, that's okay. Just pick it up where you can and keep reading until you finish the script. This is really important. It not only gives the subject permission to make mistakes, it allows them the space to play without processing additional feedback. A friend of mine's a professor of clarinet, and at the beginning of lessons encourages students to make all the weird, unusual sounds possible with their instrument, free from aesthetic bias. His argument is simple. How can you reach out and connect with an audience to share a story if you're shackled to perfection? Both of these stories, the auto cue and the clarinet, are about the same core principle. It's the messy first draft. It's the principle of trading the pressure of perfection for the freedom to create. So, in conclusion, what does this work of setting the stage really look like in practice? For me, it comes down to three choices. It's the choice to be the filter, to protect your people from the noise so they can think. It's the choice to invite the authentic voice, to listen for what's really happening and create a space where it's safe. It's safe enough for the truth to be spoken. And it's the choice to give permission to fail, to trade the pressure of perfection for the freedom to be creative and get it wrong on the way to finding out what works best for you. That's the whole thing. Our role isn't to write every line of dialogue for the people in our team. Our role is to create the story structure where they feel safe enough to find and use their own authentic voice.